Welcome to the 2020 Greensteading Summit presented by the Green Dream Project. This is a special series of videos featuring permaculturists, homesteaders, farmers, gardeners, and people dedicated to sustainable living. We thank you so much for joining us.
What's up, guys? My name is Tony Kasowski, also known as Tony Grows Food. I am an urban farmer, teacher, consultant, really helping people grow food in their spaces, whether that's their home, church, business, charity. I was the co-founder of the St. Vincent de Paul Urban Farm in Phoenix, Arizona, where we converted old parking lots and turned those into permaculture style food forests. Raised a ton of money and generated over 100,000 pounds of food in just a couple years. Now I am primarily focusing on residential gardens, education, and really letting people know what is possible, especially here in the low desert of Phoenix, Arizona, as far as producing food and medicine in their home office, again, church, or similar. Well, some of the techniques that I use are really adapted from, one, a lot of experience. Growing food is kind of like swimming. You could read all the books about it, you could watch all the TV and YouTube or whatever, but when you start to do it is really when you start to learn for real. And so in my 10 years of doing this, permaculture has really been kind of one of the pillars of my techniques, my ethics. And one of the things I do like about permaculture is it does have a set of ethics. And those are basically, giving back to your community, taking care of the land, and also taking care of yourself. And, you can do that in any environment, in any type of biome. Here in the desert, one of the things that I really make everybody do, or I really practice, is mulching. A lot of our trees here are not like maples or oaks or big leafy trees. We have a lot of sun here in Phoenix, and so even if you look up here at this mesquite, the leaves are very narrow, okay? And they don't need to capture a lot of sun. They just need a little bit of the stuff we got. And so when these leaves do drop, which they don't really, it doesn't create a lot of organic matter in the soil. So in Arizona, we have very mineral dense soil, but it lacks organic matter. So what we do is we put the organic matter back in the soil by adding things like compost, worm castings, and mulch. And if I was to describe my gardening technique in one word, it would just be mulch, and really building the organic matter in the soil, protecting that soil, keeping the water where we want it. It's 115 degrees today. That's going to cause a significant amount of evaporation. I think I'm standing in an anthill here. But with that being said, and beyond that too, is like the permaculture techniques: capture, sink, and store your water, slow down your water, all of these things, creating kind of a food forest atmosphere with an overstory, an understory, perennial minded crops, but also with the annuals. I would say I'm like a realistic permaculturist and a real applicable, and permaculture absolutely is. But for me, there's a couple things in permaculture that, we're in a place where we're so far away from permaculture and really people growing their own food and growing their own medicine and doing it mindfully. So on the other side where we're at, we have fast food restaurants and Amazon one-click. And so I think kind of what I do is meet people in the middle and then scoot them over to the full permaculture hippie side. So, on top of that, one of the things that I always do for all my gardens is filter the water. We live in a place with very heavy chlorine and also heavy metals in the water. The main part of growing food or growing anything is going to be your soil and the microbiology and the living soil system. And if you don't have good microbiology, you're not going to have healthy plants. And we have chlorine in our water to get rid of microbes after they treat the water. And that just doesn't, that's really counterintuitive. So beyond that, there is heavy metals in most municipal waters, so we pull those two things out, and that is one of the things that I just abide by, is adding organic matter, mulching, and good water. If you want to compost at your homestead, you know, one of the things that I really recommend is an open compost pile. The tumbler types of compost, there are some designs that have some technology types of things in them that work better than others, but for the most part, you've got too small of a space to really generate the heat needed consistently to get to a thermophilic point. And to keep that simple, basically you need to get to certain temperatures above about 125, and 155 or under is called your thermophilic temperature, and that's going to be where the majority of your controlled decomposition happens. And in a little tumbler, if you're not maintaining it and turning it and watering it and keeping it really in check almost, you know, every couple days, especially here in Phoenix where it's so dry, you're really going to have a little bit of difficulty and probably cause more bugs to be in there. If you put too much nitrogen in, it'll be too much pest. So really the most basic way that I recommend composting is you've got four elements in compost. You have your high nitrogen, your high carbon, your air, and water. And you need all those things in a balance to decompose properly. Everything will break down eventually, but if you want it to be in the usable format, your best bet is going to be to use some logic when doing this. And so really what I recommend is about 70% of your browns or high carbon. And so you want to start your pile on the ground with about 4 to 6 inches, or even more if you like, of wood chips or straw or old crunchy leaves, and that's going to be your high carbon. After that, you're going to want to put your high nitrogen, and you're only going to want to put maybe 1 inch of your food scraps, your grass-eating manures, things like coffee grounds, and then again you're going to cover it with that high carbon. Think of making like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or lasagna. You've got layers, and you really want to cover everything with the high carbon. 1, to keep the smell down. 2, you don't want a bunch of bugs and animals coming and digging through your compost pile. So if they can't smell that, you're going to have a better chance of them keeping it good. Also 2, you want your compost to be about the moisture of a wrung out sponge, and not really any more wet and not really any less wet. So finding that balance, watering and turning your compost pile is really a great place to start. I handle pests in the garden by not handling them. I let nature really take care of pests. Really what I'm trying to do is set up a system that is more self-sufficient. So we're not just encouraging bumblebees to come, but we're also encouraging wasps, and we're also encouraging spiders, and we're also really encouraging what those are going to eat. Many times that's your aphids or your hornworms or your bad bugs. And the reason I do this is because nature as a system really works well. Unless you've got an invasive type of bug, you're going to have something that's going to eat that 99% of the time. And when you start to selectively try and eliminate certain pests, you're usually going to be eliminating their predators as well. And the reason being is because, you know, you're spraying on this leaf, and whether it's something that they need to eat and ingest to make them not be alive anymore, or it suffocates them, there's really no discrepancy on that spray, okay? And so you're really doing yourself more of a disservice by spraying the bugs that you think are bad. Many times pests are a symptom of inadequacies in your soil. So just like a human, if they're not getting what they need in their diet, they're going to be more susceptible to illness. Same thing with a plant. If a plant is not receiving the nutrients and elements that it needs to be healthy and survive, the bugs are gonna know that, and they're going to be attacking. So my best advice on making your plants pest-free is to encourage healthy plants by encouraging healthy soil, and then they will have a natural immunity, just like humans do, to fight those pests off. My advice to new gardeners would be just to start, okay? Gardening is kind of like swimming. You can read all the books in the world, but really observing and getting a feel for your hands in the dirt, and watching the plants grow and develop from seed and then producing fruit, and kind of the trials and tribulations of growing food. You know, I've read a lot of books, and I've watched a ton of YouTube videos and whatever, but the most learning I get is from actually seeing it, feeling it, observing how nature works in real life. You know, other than that, mulch. The number one thing I recommend to people is observation, and that is the first step of permaculture, is to observe the environment, observe the space, and look for things like, where is the sun in July at 2 p.m. versus where is the sun hitting in December at 2 p.m. Also, when it rains, is there low parts of your yard that are going to collect water? Is there high parts of your yard that are not going to get any water? Are there animals that come through your yard? You know, are there mice, bunnies, birds? All these things are going to kind of go in your bank of information. And before you write that garden check, you really want to know as much as possible about the property. Now, as far as actually starting the garden goes, you know, I usually recommend to go in phases and not do everything at once. Reason being is that way, if it is something you don't like, you can not do that again. If it is something you do like, however, you might want to make a few amendments, you can go ahead and make those. Gardening is really about a continuous learning cycle, and as you know, that learning curve can be a year though, because seasonally you may be able to only grow for certain times. So, you know, observation is really key with starting your space. And then, you know, another thing too is just to start with the best materials you can and build your soil up. You know, chemical fertilizers are not your friend. Things like Craigslist and OfferUp, you can a lot of times find materials to make your garden for cheap or free, and just utilizing your community in that sense. Another thing I would really recommend too is read some books. You know, Gaia's Garden's a really good one, and get some information. Talk to some people from your area. Do some research and observe other people too. I really recommend, you're walking into growing a garden and you can kind of have this narrow box in your head of what a garden can be, or this narrow view, when there's really a lot out there. And it's one of the most creative things you can do with a space is to do a vegetable flower garden, even an orchard. So take a look on Pinterest or Instagram, or just online for different garden designs and what people are growing in your area. Visit community gardens, because that's going to really take your mind and fill it with a lot of stuff that you didn't know, so you can critically think using your space and the information you have to make a vegetable garden or orchard or productive space that really makes the most sense for you and your space.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to check out the other summit videos as well. They'll be available for a limited time on the Green Dream Project YouTube channel. Remember to check out the links in the video description for more information on our speakers and to find out how to get access to all the summit videos to watch anytime.